Hello, everybody. Welcome to UFOs Seriously. I'm your host, Alejandro Rojas. Just so you know, I am a UFO journalist. I've been writing about this topic for many years. I've been involved with some hands-on investigation, lots and lots and lots of stuff. So that's why I'm here sharing information. But what I like to share, especially since I'm a journalist and I write and I deal with the mainstream, is kind of what's out there in the media and what are some of the most important aspects to this phenomena that are most credible and impactful to society in general. So that's why this is an exciting show. Now, if you want me to say aliens are here and the Galactic Federation is talking to me in my brain and giving me this information, sorry, that's not the type of stuff you're going to get here. So just so you're aware, because I know some of you are looking for that. And I'm not saying that's not happening out there. I'm just saying I'm not aware of it. But we can talk about those type of things and others as time goes on. But we have an exciting show because there's a lot of cool news and a lot of cool stuff going on. But first, for my listeners who have been here loyally with me over time, I want to share a couple things. So you can see I changed things up a little bit. I've got some logos. So here is the International UFO Congress, which I help organize. It has people who talk to aliens talking at that conference. It's a little more, I will say, populist in that it covers the whole gamut of what people think is going on, but it covers researchers, not just these people who are making up stuff, because unfortunately there are those people. OpenMinds.tv, who I write for, we cover UFO news. In fact, we're going to be looking at that website soon. And here is my Twitter tag. If you want to follow me on Twitter, because that's probably where I'm most active, like sharing everything. But I share it on Facebook, on Instagram, and many other places. But that's a good place to follow me. By the way, you'll see over my shoulder here this hovering UFO. I changed it. It used to be the black one, but now I've got a black background, so I needed a silver one because we've got silver gray. At the UFO Congress, they sell these. It's actually owned by my girlfriend, but I work for her on all this stuff as well, so help her out with that. And so if you want to get one of those cool lamps, you can at ufocongress.com or store.ufocongress.com. So some of the people in the chat, I want to say hi. Let's see, Doc Holliday, Dirk Bonestill, love the name. And then who else we got? Bacon Cheddar Bomb, love that name. Bacon Cheddar Bomb is saying, did you tweet out the stream being live? No, I didn't, because it's live right now and I can't just go tweet, can I? Well, the show is live. I think it actually auto-tweets. Let's check. Twitter. In fact, let's go ahead. Well, no, let's not do that. Let's go. Yeah, let's go together. Why don't you all... See, now this is boring. What am I doing, Bacon Cheddar Bomb? What do you got me doing here, buddy? No, it didn't auto-tweet. I think YouTube doesn't auto-tweet anymore. They used to, so sorry about that. Thanks for the advice. Sorry for that little moment. But let's get into it. Let's get into some cool stuff. Before we get into cool stuff, one more thing of business. I want to thank all of my Patreons, because I do have a Patreon site. We'll look at that too, because I list a lot of what's going on there. But a lot of cool people. I want to thank, and I probably thank people several times, but I want to thank Andrew, Joseph, Les, Stuart, Layla, James, Gary, Guillaume, David, Ryan, who else we got here? Ron, Amy, Richard, lots of really cool people who have lately been joining me on Patreon and helping me out here. It is a lot of help. You do get a discount. So like if you look at YouTube down here, you'll see some t-shirts and stuff. It does help to give me some cash because it helps me keep doing what I'm doing. But that's okay. Otherwise, it's also helpful if you come to the UFO Congress, you buy these cool lamps or other cool stuff at the UFO Congress site, or a number of other things that you could do. Just actually hitting the subscribe button below is a big help also. So, and I thank you all for being here. But just I want to thank those people who are helping me that way. And Patreon subscribers win stuff. So I'm going to give some stuff away, but I don't know what yet, because really I get, as someone in the press, I get lots of cool stuff for some of these TV shows. In fact, let me show you. I got this from Project Blue Book, the television show. They sent me this bag. It's actual leather. This is like a pricey bag. And inside it are secret documents. They are so secret that confidential. Project Blue Book. And it's a whole case file. Pretty neat, huh? But I'm not giving that away, not yet, not until Karen makes me throw it out because we don't have room or something. But I don't know. I may give this one away if I don't have enough room. Not the bag, probably. I don't know, maybe. But yeah, I do give stuff regularly, and I'm just queuing you up. So next week, you got to join me next week because I will announce the giveaway. Following week, I will give it away to Patreon patrons. So if you want to get have a chance to get one of these things, go become a patron because I'm so thankful to those people. So, and I give you something back, and you can join as low as $1. I mean, come on, people. $1. Okay, so now let's get into the UFO news and other cool stuff going on out there. Let me log out of this one because what I will show you first is my Patreon, which we were just talking about, but I want to log out so you can't see my back-end personal stuff. Okay, so here we go. There's the browser. All right, so let's check out some of what's going on here. Roswell Mysteries Decoded. So I mentioned this last week. I was on a television show on the CW called Roswell Mysteries Decoded. I actually was a contributing producer for this. In fact, really, I'm the one who organized, or at least kind of designed what we were going to investigate. And so I announced this because last week on the UFO Seriously Live, the show actually aired right after UFO Seriously Live. So hopefully some of you watched it. Love to hear what you think, and I'll go look at some of your comments in just a second in the chat. But what's cool about this thing is that it was a lot of fun, and we covered. Here's what my thought was when we covered in the show. I wanted to cover a couple of areas of investigation that are ongoing to show that Roswell is an open case. There is certainly evidence to be had out there. So there's still stuff to discover. And I wanted to exemplify that. So we covered a couple of investigations that are ongoing. The other thing that I wanted to demonstrate was that the Roswell was a cover-up. In fact, let me go to YouTube here. YouTube. And I'm going to show you a video I did because... Oops, wrong channel. What's all that? What's with all those ladies? Right here. So Roswell cover-up explained. So I did this video because essentially with the show, I really wanted to get it across that we're calling it a cover-up because there is evidence that it is a cover-up. And I cover that in this video here. I went live. Maybe some of you saw this, but I want to go to some of the links that I provided because here's why I'm calling it a cover-up, and here's why I say we know that. I'll go over it here with you guys. So I use legitimate links to show people, and you can do this. I mean, if you know skeptics, if you know people are like, Roswell, why do you say it's alien? You're stupid. I'm not saying it's alien here, but you can say, well, it is a cover-up. They lied about it, so we don't know what it is. What happened is in July, it was like July 8th, 1947, the Air Force released a press release saying we captured a flying disc. Because this man, Jesse Marcel, he's an intelligence officer with another intelligence officer, Dick Cavett, went out to this ranch where supposedly this UFO had crashed. They saw the material. They collected some of that material. They brought it back to the base, Jesse Marcel was told to fly to Fort Worth and that the material was also being flown to Fort Worth. When Jesse Marcel got there, he walked into this room with General Roger Ramey and Colonel DuBose, who worked for Ramey, and they said, we're going to tell people this weather balloon is what we found. And you can see in these pictures what this is debris from a weather balloon. Here's Ramey and DuBose. We also covered, look, he's got a memo in his hand. What does this memo say? Bum, bum, bum. Ongoing investigation. You can see some more about that in Roswell Mysteries Decoded. But we're talking about this material. So here is Marcel holding that material as well. And essentially, and I get this firsthand from his son, who I knew well, who has since unfortunately passed away. Marcel has passed away also, he and his son. His son, who saw this material because his dad brought some home, said that they told my dad, we're going to say this was a weather balloon, and that's what he did. He didn't complain. He said, yes, sir. If you want to tell people it's a weather balloon, by golly, I'm sticking to the story because I'm a good soldier. So they did. But it turned out, and then just so you know, at Fort Worth, they did have weather balloons, and this is what one looked like, a Raywind target, this one's called, actually. I think, before I say that definitively, we should say that. Here we go. A radar device being attached to a weather balloon. But here's why I'm saying this is a cover-up, because this material is not what Jesse Marcel found in the forest, and we know, or in Roswell in the desert. We know this for a few reasons. The day after this happened, in July 9th, 1947, the Air Force, Roger Ramey, released a press release saying, oh, it was just a weather balloon, and he released these pictures saying, this is what Marcel found. Look, it's just simply a weather balloon. The story was then lost to history. Nobody really talked about it. You could see it, a few obscure references, but it was just nobody cared about Roswell anymore. Not until the late 70s when Jesse Marcel came out, and he started saying that, no, what I found in the desert was not a weather balloon. It was something much more mysterious, and it was certainly not that material. So, boom, there's witness number one. Witness number two is this person right here, DuBose, who went on to become a brigadier general. He says that material, this weather balloon, was also not what Marcel brought in. He said that was a cover story. He says he doesn't know what was really brought in, so he's not sure if it's alien or something strange like Marcel is saying, but he's saying it is a cover-up. This was not the same material. So there we go. There's two witnesses who were there. However, there is another piece of evidence here. The Air Force's own report. So the Air Force did a couple of reports. Oh, this takes forever to load. I guess you'll just have to watch it in this video. But the Air Force, look at me. The Air Force did a couple of reports. Here's one of them. Fact versus fiction in the New Mexico desert. And if you go down to one of the pages in the reports right here, it talks about this Project Mogul. So it says that actually what we think it was Project Mogul. Well, they talked to one of the scientists that was dealing with Project Mogul, and Project Mogul was a program that was out of Alamogordo, which isn't too far away. I mean, it's couple hours drive away or something like that, but or maybe an hour or so. But this was a program where they were launching something that looked pretty similar to weather balloons, but it had radar and sound equipment on it, so it can detect seismic waves in the sky, so they could determine if Russia was testing atom bombs. That's what they were looking for, and that's what this project did. And so they talked to this scientist, and this scientist said, you know what? They probably found one of my stray Mogul balloons. However, he did say in this that what Ramey showed in those photographs was not a Mogul balloon. So the weather balloon thing must have been a cover story. You can see it right there. A possible indication of a cover story. So again, they're saying there's a cover-up. Ramey, and in this document, they say there's no indication or nothing that explains to us why Ramey hid whatever that material really was and told people it was a weather balloon. It could be, they speculate that he knew about Project Mogul. He knew it was a secret project. He knew that what Marcel found was Project Mogul, and that he essentially was covering up for Project Mogul. Couple problems with that. One problem is we don't know that he did know it was Project Mogul. He would have had to identify it as that, and he would have identified it, whereas Marcel wouldn't have known. The other problem is that this professor also says Mogul wasn't really that big of a secret. It was nothing big enough to really cover up for. So that's a mystery. Either way, it is a cover-up. Roswell is a cover-up. They create part of their own problem by not being honest with the public. And so the Air Force was dishonest from the get-go on that. Does it mean that it was aliens that crashed in the desert? No, not necessarily. But yeah, this special is really cool, and I wanted to get that point across because nobody covers that point. Nobody points out that in the Air Force's own document, they say there is a cover story, that this debris they say it was is not what it really was. So I think that's pretty important. So yeah, I hope you watched the show, and I hope you liked it. In fact, I'm going to go to chat and see if there's any comments. See what you guys are thinking. Let's see here. July 9th is your birthday, somebody said in the chat. That's really cool. Some people said, yeah, they liked the show. That's really cool. Oh, they like the bag that they gave me. I know. Wasn't that friggin' cool? So awesome. You know, National Geographic always sends me some really cool stuff, too. In fact, I gave something away to one of my Patreons from there. So we'll do that again. We'll give you some of these cool things. Somebody else said maybe they just sent out a whole bunch of stories to just kind of muddle what really happened. I don't know. That's a good question. But yeah, some people said, people saying they like the show, which I'm really, really happy for that. Thank you guys so much for saying that, even if that's not true. But hopefully it is. You probably wouldn't lie to me. Anyway, this actually is for the last podcast that I did, because of course many of you may be aware that I do a podcast called Open Mind UFO Radio, and on that podcast I had Ryan Sprague, who is actually my choice, one of my choices for potential host to the show, and he was chosen, and I think he did a great job. So he and I talked about Roswell. We talked about the making of the show in the latest podcast as well. Here's something else you can see. So Project Blue Book, right? I just held up that bag. Well, they're bribing me to keep writing about them. But this is my review of the last episode. So the second episode of Project Blue Book was the Flatwoods Monster episode. And hopefully, I don't know if you're aware or not, hopefully you read this article if you're not, but that was a real case. People really did believe they saw a alien or some strange alien in the forest after something crashed there. Now, here's the breakdown of the real story. I'll give you the difference. In the Project Blue Book television show, there is a mother with her 2 kids and a dog. The kids see, this meteor or fireball streak across the sky, and it looks like it crashes in the distance. They grab their mother, all 4 of them, including the dog, run over to take a look, and they see what it looks like a spaceship because things are on fire and it's smoky. And then they see this tree-like thing. It looks like almost out of The Hobbit, kind of moving, and big eyes looking at them. So they scream and they run away. When Hynek gets to town to investigate with Captain Colin Quinn of Project Blue Book, the Air Force officer, they find that the kids also have burns around their faces and eyes, mysteriously. So they go to investigate, and eventually they essentially say it's probably a bird, or it was probably an owl on a tree, which is what skeptics said that it was. And it turned out, as you can see here in the picture, that it was just a large meteorite. So that's how they closed it. But Hynek did find a bunch of radioactive. He found that the area was very radioactive on the show, and that the kids, of course, whatever was messed up with their eyes is mysterious. So that's what happened in the show. In real life, there was actually a lot more people that were involved. There was something like 7 or possibly more people. So it did start with these 2 kids who did see this fireball. There are 2 boys playing. They ran to one of their houses, got their mother, and started to go trek across town and then out into the forest to go look at this thing. Well, on the way, they brought this whole entourage. People started joining them to go search. One of the people that joined them was a 17-year-old National Guardsman who kind of took the lead. He had a flashlight with him, and they're in the forest, and the fog was really thick, and he sees something. He puts his light on it, and he falls back, I guess, in terror. He fell back because what he had seen was some sort of creature. Let's see. I have a quote in here from what he said it was. His description was just kind of this big, large thing with red eyes. Here it is. A 10-foot monster with a blood-red body and a green face that seemed to glow. Creepy. So, and I think that this is a link. Yeah, this is a link to a History Channel article on the Flatwoods Monster. And I bring this up because here's the picture of what they claim to have seen. Now, it's certainly not tree-like looking. Let me turn this off because it's the trailer. But that's what the skeptics felt. It was probably, just a tree with an owl on it. But you could see it's more of a weird robot-looking thing. So here he is, too. This is Gene Lemon. This is the kid I was just talking about with the flashlight who first saw it. And then this is a woman, one of the kids' moms, who they grabbed, who was out in the forest, too. And supposedly 7 different people saw this weird thing. This is a sketch out of several sketches that were made soon after the event took place. Well, the media got a hold of this thing, and it became a big deal. It was in the news and everything, so it became a big thing, the Flatwoods Monster. And even in that town to this day, it's kind of a big deal. I think you'll find this interesting, too. You can find all of the Project Blue Book files online. And I want to show you what the Project Blue Book file looks like on this case. So here's the front. Every Project Blue Book has a, opening piece of paper like this. Some of the cases will have that, and that's it. But usually there's a little bit more information regarding their entire investigation. What's interesting here is what they call it, the West Virginia Monster, so-called. Actually, the object was the well-known Washington area meteor of 12 September landing near Flatwoods, West Virginia. Have confirmed of an astronomy club from Akron, Ohio. Letter from E.C. Blank, President, Akron Assistant Club, it looks like. That's probably astronomy, AST. Couple things to note here. First of all, they don't reference the monster at all. They reference the object that was seen, and they say, it was definitely that meteor. And it seems like that's established, so I'll take that. But they didn't reference the monster at all, so they didn't even go there to speculate what that might have been, which I think is sort of interesting. Another thing that's interesting here is to look at the short notes where the sentences are not complete. They use weird kind of abbreviations. The grammar is not that great. The reason I point this out is that there are a lot of times where documents will come out that are leaked or maybe even obtained by a FOIA, and people are skeptical because they're like, oh my gosh, the spelling's atrocious. They misspelled this, they misspelled that. That happens, guys. I mean, that is not abnormal to see that sort of thing. But let's take a look. There is a second page here to the investigation. So what is that? Well, all this is an account of what they saw. So just a white light or different colored light that shot across the sky. That's all. It doesn't say anything about the monster part or as you can see, it's very small. So, and it's one page without a lot of information. And that's it. Those are the only two files that we have on this from Project Blue Book, interestingly enough. But it's a case that has a lot of media attention and a lot of media stories on it. So very interesting case. So yeah, read up on the Flatwoods Monster. And also, let me know what you think. If you read this story, go ahead and come down into the comments and let me know what you think. Wow, there's a lot more comments than there were last time I looked. But opinions vary. Some people are saying it's good. Some people are saying it's bad. This person says Aidan Gillen is sorely miscast. I totally disagree with that. I think he makes a great Hynek, personally. And this is kind of interesting. I was saying there's this weird part where there's this Russian agent, this pretty beautiful blonde woman who's very fashionable and stylish, and she's hitting on Hynek's wife. And I thought that was weird. If this Russian agent is trying to get close to this woman, you'd think she would befriend her, but there are definitely sexual undertones there, and I don't think anybody would disagree. I've seen other people comment. So it's extremely flirtatious, which is a bit strange. And I thought, are they doing that just to bring some kind of, sexual excitement to the show? Possibly. This person said, no, it could be because they're trying to trap Mimi into doing things that would be embarrassing to her. That's a good point. That could be kind of compromat, a word that we've heard a lot lately in the media. So that was an interesting suggestion. I think that was a good suggestion from that person. So, yeah, read my review and let me know what you think. Roswell Mystery Decoded. Oh, one thing I didn't mention and what this is a link to the show. So you can actually watch the show online for free at that link. I want to check in real quick with some of my chatters. Someone wants to go look for the Flatwoods Monster? Do it. And other people are kind of saying hi. Somebody's talking about a segue. And so, okay. No questions or anything. So let us continue on. All right. So here's that Roswell cover-up explain. I already told you about that. Oh, this I think is an interesting story I wrote. Also for Den of Geek. And this is in relation to the television show Roswell, New Mexico. So some of you were aware of the CW show Roswell. And essentially it was these high school kids, some of them turned out to be aliens that were in the spacecraft from Roswell. And they're now in high school and they're flirting and having romantic interludes with some of the humans. So you can see that here. And I guess Roswell, New Mexico is kind of a follow-up where now these kids are out of college and these two star-crossed lovers come across each other again. But he's an alien. And I guess she's human, so that creates issues and intrigue and that sort of thing. I haven't seen the show yet. I guess the first episode just aired. But really, our Roswell show on the CW was to help promote this. And so is this, well, not this article is just about Roswell, New Mexico. And they asked me if I wanted to write something about Roswell on Den of Geek because this show's coming up. And I said, what would be interesting, I think, is how Roswell gained its alien reputation in the first place. And so I cover that. I cover kind of what I already shared with you all before. We also have a video on it that they created based on my story here. But like I said, it wasn't until the late 70s that Jesse Marcel came out When he did, he spoke first with a UFO researcher named Stanton Friedman. Stanton Friedman was working with a guy named Charles Moore. They began to investigate the Roswell incident. Then Charles Moore, along with a guy named Berlitz, and his first name is eluding me right now, but they wrote a book in 1980 about the Roswell incident. There you go, Charles Berlitz. Great timing, video. And that book is what made Roswell famous. Some other books came out soon after that, but they had gotten other witnesses to talk about it. So Roswell didn't become famous until the 80s. And by the late 80s, it was very famous. And now, of course, everybody knows about Roswell. You just have to say Roswell, and people don't think of the town. They think of this. If they think of the town, they think of festivals. But they think of, this alien crash, allegedly. So there was no real talk about aliens at the beginning. What they talked about was something that had crashed, and there was debris, not aliens. That wasn't until 1989 when I guess the first report was after a television show about Roswell. This guy, local Roswellian, Glenn Dennis, called the show and then soon after talked to other researchers saying that he used to work at Ballard Funeral Home. And at that time, the Air Force had called and said that they needed some small caskets. Childlike caskets for some reason. So that was mysterious. Then he says the next day or soon after, he met up with a nurse who worked at Roswell Army Airfield, and she told him that she was present during an autopsy of alien beings, and she even drew, or at least told him about what these alien beings look like. He drew it out, and then she disappeared. The hard part is he's not coming out with this story until 1989 after Roswell was already big. So, of course, people are questioning whether or not he was telling the truth. His credibility underwent more damage when later, under pressure, he did give a name of the nurse because he said he promised he wouldn't give her name out. Well, he did give researchers a name. They tried to look for her. They didn't find anybody of that name existing, so they had to admit that, or he had to admit, sorry, I made up that name. That wasn't real. He says he made it up because he was protecting her because he promised not to share who she was, but people were obviously upset with that, and many people believe that that tainted his testimony because he lied. Now, according to Don Schmidt and Tom Carey, two UFO researchers, in their latest book, they spoke with some friends of Glenn Dennis, and they say, at least a couple people, according to them, and they say that Glenn Dennis had told them back in the past that this had all occurred, but they didn't believe him. They thought he was joking. So that's how the whole alien thing came about. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of people claiming there's aliens there. The only other witness that I cover, just because of the high level of credibility he has, and because he's a very high-level official, is Colonel Corso. He wrote a book called The Day After Roswell that was actually co-written. It was kind of dictated to UFO researcher, oh man, and I can't remember his name right now, but actually let's just look it up. And he claims that while in the Army, in charge of the foreign, it wasn't just Corso, in charge of the, this department that essentially examines foreign technology, that he was given by his boss a box full of material that was from Roswell, and he said it all looked very strange. His boss told him, do whatever you think is best with it. So he decided to give these different technologies to different corporations they were working with to help them develop these technologies they were working on. And they did. Some of these technologies are Kevlar, fiber optics, computer chips, things like that. This story got pretty big. Soon after the guy wrote the book, he was pretty old, and it was essentially his deathbed confession. He said that a bunch of him and his friends had committed to getting the truth out. Whichever was the last of them to survive, they would tell the truth. And he was the last one, and he was about to pass. And he did pass away soon after the book was written. Not too long, maybe within a couple of years. And they actually, because his story's big enough, there have been a couple people. Here it is. Bill Burns. Good old Bill Burns. But Corso said that, or these companies said that there's no way that we have a track record of how these technologies were developed. Never did we get any alien material to help us. So who knows? But you know what? If you listen to the podcast, Chris Cogswell, a PhD in electrical engineering, and I were talking about some of the problems related to some of these stories about looking at and examining materials that are unusual, and how would you prove that? And the other difficult part that Chris brought up and we were talking about, which makes a lot of sense, is that if you discovered a material that had properties that was more advanced than anything we'd come up with, you would likely want to patent that, or not. But the point being that you would not want to share that technology. You would want to use it to your advantage, make tons of money off of it because it's your proprietary technology. And so you wouldn't share with the public that you found something extraterrestrial. Why would you? Because you don't want, any legal issues, and this technology you want to claim for yourself. And I'm sure that would be a very enticing proposal for anybody who had their hands on material like this, because they would be able to make millions and millions, maybe $1 billion off of some kind of high-tech stuff they got off of a ET spacecraft. So, yeah, so I don't know if Corso was telling the truth or not. It seems pretty far-fetched, a lot what he has to say. Some UFO researchers or Roswell researchers say some of what he says doesn't jive with what really happened. But I don't know. It's a really strange thing. Why would this, colonel, who was a very important person, you'd have to read about him. He's done a lot. Why would he come out and say something like this? So it's definitely an interesting wrinkle to the whole story. So that's what this story is. And then, of course, we talked about this last week. This was my podcast from before the last show, the year in review. So that's some of what I've been up to, but we do have a lot of interesting news to cover as well. Before I get to that, I'm going to check in with some of my buddies here. They're talking about UFO sightings. Interesting. Somebody said they're getting bored of Roswell. I can see that, and that is why I wanted to do more with Roswell than what has been done before, because to show that there are some ongoing investigations. And you can see that in the show. You can hear Ryan and I talk about it a little bit, but watch the show. It's free, and I can understand why Roswell would be boring, but there are some avenues of research that may be fruitful in the future. I touched on one just a minute ago. So who knows? It could be, that we, after all these years, do find something out. It could still hold the smoking gun to this whole phenomena. So, Renee, I'm a diehard fan of yours. Can I get a wrench to mod? Oh, man, I don't know. We'll talk about it. Let's talk about that, Renee. Send me an email or a message. Right, before all this, Corso was rock solid. Then it gets odd. Yeah, Bill Burns is from the television show UFO Hunters. Some of you who saw that. Someone else said, would love to know what Corso originally said without the dramatic additions. Well, I've got something for you, my friend, that you may not be aware of. So let's go to Open Minds TV. And we have a document no one else has that is straight from Corso. If you go into UFO resources, you'll see here Corso's Dawn of a New Age. So essentially, I don't know. I've heard different stories as to why he put this together. From what I understand, I've been told one that this is his personal notes um, as to what happened. His word, like someone was asking. Someone said that they didn't like what Bill Burns did, that he embellished and added some information that wasn't necessarily accurate. I don't know if that's true or not. I would doubt that. I would hope that wasn't the case. But either way, we have a copy of the Corso's original notes that supposedly is what they used to create the book the day after Roswell. And this is straight from Corso. So if you go, like I said, UFO Resources, Corso's Dawn of a New Age, see we have a little bit of info about it, and click on that, and you've got a PDF. Oh, it's going to take a while to load. Why is everything taking so long these days? What's up with the internet? It's supposed to be faster. But anyways, download this document. We're going to let it download for a minute here because I want to show it to you. I'm sure I got it on my computer somewhere. There we go. So Dawn of a New Age. We did put our little logo on it because it was something special to us. We got permission from the family, but also there was a gentleman named Maurizio Baiata. I love to say his name. Maurizio Baiata, who used to work at OpenMinds.tv, and he had done some quite a few interviews with Paula Harris, with Philip Corso, and so he had a copy of this straight from Corso, and while he was working with Open Minds, we were able to work and get permission to release this. So this is his original notes. Maybe we'll pop back here in a little while, and we'll look at that a little more. So in just a minute. It's probably hurting my streaming. All right. So, yeah, great Corso document. But now that we're at Open Minds, let's go check out. I've got some links here to some of the stuff we've already talked about. But here are some UFO headlines. So let's look at these. UFOs in the headlines. The New York Times Project Blue Book is based on a true UFO story. Here it is. That's my old-timey news story. I don't know why they used to talk like that, but this is an image that pisses people off. So a lot of people are really mad about this picture because this picture shows Hynek with what looks like an alien, and people are like, Hynek didn't find any aliens. They're sensationalizing and they're faking and they're embellishing, and this is crazy and this is so frustrating. In fact, this New York Times article even touches on that. If you read this caption, it says, Aidan Gillen as the astronomer J. Allen Hynek in Project Blue Book on history. The series dramatizes with some flagrant embellishment an actual Air Force program designed to investigate and debunk UFOs. Here's a couple things. First is that I did an interview, maybe some of you heard it, in a podcast with David O'Leary, the show creator and writer, and I asked him, what's up with this picture, dude? And he said, it is not what you think. He even said, I asked them not to include this picture in their marketing, but they did because he's like, I know people are going to get upset. It's going to give the wrong impression, but they did it anyways, obviously because it's an exciting picture. But he said it is not what you think it is. So before you get too upset about this, I would consider that. But there's a couple other things here to note. First of all, this story was written by Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kane. Leslie, I've interviewed quite a few times. She wrote the book UFOs, Generals and Other Officials Go on the Record. That's a short version of the title. But she wrote, what is one of the best UFO books ever that people have to check out. But they're also the two of the three, and they're the two who initiated the story in the New York Times in December 2016 that broke the whole Pentagon UFO program thing, the ATIP Elizondo thing. These are the people who broke that story, and now they're writing about Blue Book. And this is why even if you're upset about this kind of stuff, here's why the television show is really important, because it's getting people to pay attention to the fact that the Air Force investigated UFOs and that their lead scientist, over time, came to find that this was a real phenomena, a true mystery that deserves scientific investigation. And it allows and sparks conversation such as this story in the New York Times. So, for instance, hopefully I'll get to interview Leslie sometime soon, but here's what they're claiming, that this was an actual Air Force program designed to investigate and debunk UFOs. That's a pretty strong statement. I don't think the Air Force would agree with that whatsoever. And in fact, we're going to see more about that in just a minute. But to investigate and debunk, that's a pretty strong statement. But there's more strong statements in here. They essentially go over, they talk about how this was real. Here they go. They mention her book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. If you haven't read this book, I recommend you do. In fact, I have a link to it in the description below because I recommend it as one of the most important books in this field. So some interesting things here, that Project Blue Book was a code name for an Air Force program set up in 1952. That's true. And it was it was to explain away or debunk as many as reports as possible in order to mitigate possible panic and shield the public from a genuine national security problem, an apparently technological phenomenon that was beyond control and was not Russian, yet represented an unfathomable potential threat. So they're claiming here in the New York Times that from the get-go, this thing was a cover-up for a real phenomena. Now, that may be, but, this is a pretty bold statement, especially without any proof. So, for instance, an official saying that, just the writers, especially for the New York Times, usually, like, for instance, I did an interview with Leslie about writing that article for the Pentagon, and it was really difficult because they had to vet every single statement. They had to have sources. They had to confirm those sources and the credibility of those sources. New York Times has a whole department that does this sort of thing. So these stories are really hard to get out. Perhaps because the story was about entertainment, they didn't vet it as severely as they typically do. But what they write about is that it was, important that they did this investigation, or that it's important that this story gets out also, in that, they are paying attention to this important instance. They go on and they talk about Project Sign, which was actually started in 1947, the first UFO project. They talk about how Project Sign determined that it could be extraterrestrial in nature, and that General Hoyt Vandenberg, who was the Air Force Chief of Staff that got that report, said, no, that's ridiculous, threw out that report. They also covered a few different things. But anyway, lots of important stuff. But they do make the statement that essentially that the Air Force was being deceptive this whole time about this UFO topic. So, and this is the New York Times. So here's another one. And I love this part because this is true, and this is something I think that we have to make a point of. But they said, essentially, after Blue Book, whatever the Air Force told the public, it didn't actually stop investigating UFOs, essentially, after Blue Book. A once classified memo issued secretly in October 1969, a few months before the termination of Blue Book, revealed that regulations were already in place to investigate UFO reports that were not part of the Blue Book system. The memo, written by Carol H. Bolender, an Air Force Brigadier General, went on to say reports of UFOs which could affect national security will continue to be handled through the standard Air Force procedures designed for this purpose. And actually, we talked about this on a previous UFOs live because I wrote a story about Hynek and Blue Book for Den of Geek, which said this same thing. In fact, my story is not too dissimilar from their story, except for I used citations to cite, like this one, any assumptions that I made. But here's some strong evidence. They're even saying that we weren't giving Blue Book the best cases anyway. They were going somewhere else. Where they were going, we don't know. What cases were sent somewhere else, we don't know that either. To this day, decades later. Then they also, of course, talk about how the Pentagon, program was also going on, which is also a government program when they claimed they weren't interested in UFOs anymore. So here's another article in Newsweek. It's not as good or as formed. I mean, Leslie Kane's an expert, I would say, on UFOs, and Blumenthal is very interested in the topic as well. But it's Newsweek writing about Project Blue Book, the true story. Other stories. This is a good one, and it's really interesting because this is from the Air Force Times. So this is the Air Force's newsletter writing about Project Blue Book. And they say some pretty interesting things. They go on to say, yes, it was a study. Of course, they look at it very differently. They don't look at it, or they're not claiming to look at it as a secret. They're saying it was a systematic study of unidentified flying objects to find out if UFOs were a national security threat. They say that it was determined it was not. They also say, what's true is that there was a UFO investigation going on. That's what they were looking at. But they say the series diverges from historical fact when Hynek begins to suspect that he has been duped by the government into a conspiracy to cover up the truth. Now, that is true, that we don't have any indications of Hynek believing there was a conspiracy to cover up the truth necessarily. He just felt they weren't interested in really investigating, and he thought that was unfortunate. And in fact, in a quote in my story I wrote about, he said there was this attitude that because it couldn't exist, it didn't. So they had to show that it didn't exist, or even consider that it could exist. And he said he felt bad because he was of that mind as well at the beginning, and he perpetuated that feeling. But later on, of course, he didn't. So they talk more about Hynek and how he was interested in the topic, what the Air Force's conclusions were. And then, interesting enough, they do get into the New York Times article, and they get some, December 2017. I was the one who got that. I think I said 2016, but they're right. The article was in, but essentially they're saying the Pentagon did acknowledge that they did have a UFO program, and that was acknowledged in the New York Times. They explain what it was and how Harry Reid helped them gain funding, and how he's got no problem with that. And this is a really interesting. Here's how they end the article. The existence of these programs doesn't necessarily mean that UFOs are extraterrestrial in nature, but they do show that the government takes unidentified aerial objects seriously, perhaps worried about the ever-growing capabilities of near-peer adversaries, or FAR, meaning far adversaries, aliens. So they kind of threw that in as a possibility. But this is what's interesting, because this is totally different. I mean, probably from the day I was born until maybe this year, or when this New York Times article came out, although they were hesitant to speak on it, All that time, all that 40 plus years, the government denied having any interest in UFOs. And here we have in the Air Force Times that this program does show that the government takes unidentified aerial objects seriously. That's new. That is not something we have heard. That is not something that the Air Force has said in the past, that they take UFOs seriously. Obviously, they do. Luis Elizondo, who used to run that Pentagon program, says that Pentagon program is ongoing. It would absolutely make sense that they would be interested in UFOs. During those 40 years while I was growing up and writing about this stuff and sending FOIAs and asking them about UFOs and them claiming we don't care about those, that's ridiculous. Why would you not be concerned about something you couldn't identify? At least investigate it, because it could be something that is known, or it could be technology from one of our enemies that we would want to know about. So it's absolutely ridiculous to have no interest on something that can't be identified in the sky. Doesn't mean you're searching for aliens. It means you're taking your job responsibly, and you're investigating any potential threats to our country in our airspace. So it was ridiculous for them to say that. We knew for a fact, because we've gotten government documents in the last 30, 40 years that show there have been cases that they were interested in. So it's refreshing that at least now it seems perhaps their stance will be that, yes, we do take it seriously. Yes, we do look into it, because that'll be a complete change. And that at least is rational. That at least doesn't feel like you're being lied to your face when they tell you this ridiculous, idea that they have no interest in things that are unidentified in our sky. So that's really interesting that the Air Force Times wrote that. I find that terribly interesting. Also related to Project Blue Book, here's the other type of thing that's happening is there's more and more stories all over the place. So the very first episode of Project Blue Book was about this dogfight. Really interesting, where this guy in 1948, this pilot, here he is, Lieutenant Gorman, was chasing a flying disc. And he said he started chasing this thing. He saw it near where this high school game was going. But he chased it, even trying to crash into it, almost playing chicken. He said it was coming right at him, so he flew right at it. And that at the last second, it turned. It didn't hit him. In the show Project Blue Book, it did hit his plane. That didn't really happen, but he said he physically ducked because he thought this thing was going to hit him. So he was flying very close to something that was very fast. There were a couple witnesses, including other military witnesses, and there was even some radar data. So a very good case. The Air Force said, that had to have been a balloon. He was like, no, I chased this thing for 20 minutes. I'm not going to dogfight with a balloon in the sky with my jet. Or this probably wasn't a jet. They didn't have jets till a little while after World War II. But, yeah. B-25. I wonder what that looks like. Let's look. B-25, B-25. We're going to look what a B-25 looks like. So here we go. So something like this. B-25 rock, is it? Yeah, so that's kind of like what they showed in the show also. So, and a few of these other stories are kind of like this, where, let's see. Here's my review. But it's making other sighting stories pop up. Let's look at some of those stories, but let's go check on how Dawn of a New Age is. We put it in our internet oven and let it bake, and let's see if it's come out. Oh, it has. So here we go. So this is the Corso document. You could see the beginning, Roswell, Fact or Fancy, R&D, so the R&D stuff that was done, DNA bomb, really weird stuff. He gets into some really weird stuff, people. He even says in here that he met an alien. And So he talks about that in here, but you can see this is actually from Colonel Corso himself. It is a bit of a hard read, but what I'm looking for were any pictures, because I think he did draw pictures of. Yeah, here's a picture of an alleged alien he met who had fingers with little pods on it. So, I don't know. He talks about some weird stuff in here, but yeah, if you look him up, his background he's very accomplished, pretty incredible background. So, yeah, you can check that out. But more stories. Some of these are popping out, and I saw this one, and actually today, after I posted some of these stories, there were more of these that are popping up all over the place. But here's one. More than 100 UFO sightings reported in New York last year. And here's why I think these stories are popping up also, is that I guess it was a hit. That Project Blue Book got a ton of viewers. So it's got a huge viewership. So people are realizing, and of course, anything that's trending, the word, everybody's going to be writing about it. So at the end of last year, we found out keto diet was trending. And I didn't know that. I started the keto diet last week. It was a very difficult week for me last week, I'll tell you that. I've already lost 10 pounds, but my sister's been on it for a couple of years. Karen's been on it for a couple months or so. So I didn't know it was trendy when I started it, but it's supposed to help with pain and stuff. And I think I've shared with you guys, I have this disease, this spinal arthritis thing that causes me pain and at times, and so a lot of times, and so that's why I'm trying it, and so far so good. But my point here is that everybody's writing about keto because we found out at the beginning of the year that was like one of the biggest searches on the internet. Well, now it seems like everybody wants to write a UFO story because Project Blue Book has become so popular. So here's one of them in the Times Union about New York and 100 sightings that they've had. Now, they used NUFORC, the National UFO Reporting Center, which is only ran by one person, Peter Davenport, all by himself. So, they get reports, but they're not going to get as much as a Mutual UFO Network, which is a bigger organization. But you know what? Even I was actually did PR, and I was a spokesperson for MUFON, and that was when we were transforming into the digital age. But he's always done a great job at the National UFO Reporting Center because he makes everything available. It's so easy to go to his website and pull his data and see sightings in your area and stuff like that. Whereas MUFON, it's just like, I don't know. They have not got their stuff together with the digital stuff so much. So it's a little more time-consuming and difficult. And so that's why National UFO Reporting Center gets so much more, gets a lot of people writing about them because they make it really easy to go look up information. In fact, here you can click on the list and you can see what it looks like, his site. Now, all he does is take reports, so you're just going to be able to read the report. So, for example, you click this link, it'll tell you about that sighting report. So you don't get a whole lot of data, and these aren't investigated like the Mutual UFO Network investigates theirs. But even when you look at the reports, you'll see something similar at MUFON when you can get to them, but you won't find out what the results were. Got to do a little more digging to find that out. So, so we all know there are tons of sightings all over the place. MUFON collects hundreds of sightings a month. So that New York had 100 sightings is not surprising to us, but to the general public it is. And of course, one thing to remember is not all of these sightings are something unusual. But here in Phoenix, in Arizona, where I think we have, the MUFON has one of the best directors of investigation, or chief investigator, I forget what the titles are, but in charge of the investigations here, he really works hard to debunk all of these. And debunking just means looking for an answer, not to say that it's not something, but that's what you have to do, is work really hard to figure out what the mundane answer is. And if you can't, that's when you have something substantial. And that they have something like 5% remain unknown. But if you look at this story here with 100 sightings, if 5% are unknown, that's 5 sightings. So 5 people witnessing something truly anomalous in the sky is pretty significant. And that's just in 1 month. So there's a lot more stories. I'm just saying that, this Project Blue Book show is having a very big impact, I think, culturally and on the public, like we were hoping, and it is bringing much more awareness around this topic. I think that's a good deal. This is another interesting story I wanted to share with you guys, is that scientists finally figured out how to travel faster than the speed of light. Some of you are like, oh, we already knew that, because what they're talking about is going through black holes. That a black hole, as it swirls, it makes a hole in the fabric of space-time itself. But this is kind of interesting because they're moving closer to it. So essentially in this study, in that center of the black hole is what's called a singularity. And they figured, in the past they used to figure, if anything trying to go through this middle of a black hole is going to get ripped apart, destroyed, it's going to be awful, it's not going to be possible. But they have figured out that some of these singularities are different than others. They vary, and some of them are actually pretty weak, as they say. So in other words, it does create a hole in space-time, but not one that would greatly affect whatever's going through it. So it just makes it possible that this may be something that we can do in the future, is fly through the center of a black hole to somewhere else. I think more likely we're going to probably want to try to create create an artificial black hole. That seems pretty dangerous. I don't know. But at least it makes people understand a little better what's going on there. Because really the closest black hole to us is in the center of our galaxy. So it's a little bit away. It's a little far away, especially because we're out on the outskirts. This story, Harry Reid, we talked about this last week, that Harry Reid was interviewed and the interviewee asked him about UFOs, and he's still all in. He's like, yeah, it's an important topic and we need to fund and do more research into UFOs. So there was a story last week on this, but just The Hill, which of course is a very popular political news site, also wrote about it. So just that the story's out there. People are feeling at higher levels more comfortable talking about UFOs. Here's a story I haven't read but should have. Now we're getting towards the stories that I haven't read but should have. This is not a mainstream media link. However, it's really cool. This is at the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Scientific Research site. But he found, Keith Basterfield is the guy who writes this, and he found documents located from the 1955 secret UAP study by Douglas Aircraft Company. So in the 50s, Douglas Aircraft Company investigated UFOs. Why? From my understanding, what I was told by one of the engineers, actually, was that they kind of want to do what Tom DeLonge and this To the Stars group he organized with these ex-defense people and Luis Elizondo to try to glean technology from observing UFOs. They felt by studying UFOs, perhaps they could understand the technology there and develop some sort of propulsion system. So that idea has been around for quite some time. In fact, I've talked to other engineers and scientists interested in UFOs, and that is their interest. Bigelow was similar, that they want to be able to try to harness some of this technology. And of course, some of the scientists working with Tom DeLonge believe that they may be able to develop some technologies just off of what we've observed with UFOs. So that's a really cool one. Definitely check that out. Here's another really cool one. So this is the Fighter Pilot Podcast. So this is a podcast by and for fighter pilots, and they interviewed a fighter pilot you may recognize recently. Yes, it is Commander David Fravor, and his call sign was Sex for some reason. David Sex Fravor. I'm sure that's an interesting story, one that I understand he has not been willing to share yet, but maybe we'll find out one day. Tell you what, if anybody's going to find out, it's going to be me. And then you'll know because you listen to you watch my show here. So, so this is just really cool. I heard it was great by people who did listen to it because, this is a guy who chased the UFO that was in that New York Times story that I keep mentioning from December 2017. This was the Nimitz strike, carrier strike group in 2004 outside of San Diego, where they saw this Tic Tac UFO, they called it. A white Tic Tac shaped UFO, looked like a Tic Tac. He's the one who went in to get the closest look. When he did, he said it aligned itself towards him and then took off in another direction, was gone, and went at an incredible speed away. So, yeah, he's telling that story and talking about it with his fellow fighter pilots. And then finally, Fox 10 in, where is this one? In Mobile, Alabama, did a story about the Pascagoula case. So I had Kelvin Parker, one of the witnesses from Pascagoula, on my show not too long ago. And so they interviewed him. But his new book coming out, or that has come out, has gotten a lot of attention. So they've done a lot of good job reaching out. And it's an interesting case. And it's just continuing to get a lot of attention, and mostly positive attention. And my guess as to why, I want to see if there's a picture of him down here, is because he's just very credible. He comes across as very credible, down to earth type of guy. You maybe found that to be true as well when you heard him on my podcast, or if you haven't, go listen to my podcast with him. In fact, let me show you where you'll find it, actually. If you go back to Open Mind, just go to Open Minds Radio and scroll down, and you'll see all my shows here. So there's Ryan, Paul Hynek, Hynek's son, David O'Leary, the writer that I was telling you about, my honey, Jeremy Corbell, Calvin Parker, right here. Here's my interview with them. So that's how you find it. But ladies and gentlemen, that is pretty much the show for today. Let's see what people are saying in the chat before we leave. People talking about how do you create a super black hole? I don't know. That's a great question. Someone talking about how our advances in technologies were so big. That's great. That's interesting. Kind of talking about, well, maybe Corso was right. I mean, we did have a big leap in technology in the last few decades, which is true. I mean, for God's sakes, going from the space shuttle to, as we know, our phones having about 1 billion times more computing power than the space shuttle had. Anything else about the Lazar film, somebody asked? Not really. I mean, it's done very well. There are certainly mixed reviews, which is really interesting. There's been a lot of people saying that they didn't like it, and some people saying they did. I think one of the issues is, if you're a member of the Open Minds UFO News group on Facebook, if you're not, please do it. It's a great forum. It's closed, but just request to be part of it, and we'll bring you in. The reason it's closed to keep the bad guys out, or to be able to kick them out and not let them back in when they're being jerks. But a lot of skeptics in there, and I think it's probably because you listen to my show, and of course I have a kind of a skeptical perspective. And the reason why I have a skeptical perspective is because, first of all, if we pay attention to what the mainstream's doing, I think that's the most important. Then we're seeing, we're actually paying attention to the cultural shift of how everybody's accepting or not this whole UFO stuff. So I think that's really important. And it's also, if we really want to prove and look for the smoking gun, we need the most credible information possible. And I think that's really important. So if you apply those perspectives to the Bob Lazar case, it doesn't hold a lot of ground. I mean, it's one guy's claims. I'm not saying he's lying. I don't 100% believe that he is lying, but there's something weird with that case, and I don't believe him 100%. There's, one guy, and here's the argument, is that there's one guy claiming that he reverse engineered these alien spacecraft at Area 51. And he could be lying. And no matter what you say about what his motivations were, there are no motivations. Why would he do this? It would be stupid of him to do it. It's inconceivable he would do something like that. But it is even more inconceivable that we've got 9 alien spacecraft and that this guy who, from all appearances, has no degrees, was allowed to back engineer. So it's a very, very difficult issue. Isotopes are a very important thing somebody brought up. So here's why that has become such an issue. And I need to talk to others that are more, know how this works a little better, although I have a bit. But one of the things Bob Lazar claimed is that the UFOs, the alien spacecraft, ran off of element 115. And a lot of people made a big deal that he was the first one to say anything about element 115, so he predicted it. That's not true at all. Actually, element 115, if you look at the elemental scale for existence, it's natural that there would be more elements down the line. And not only that, in particular, they've looked at element 115. And I don't know this, I don't know all the details. It's all very nuanced when it comes to science. But essentially, they're looking for what might be stable elements further down in the periodic table because they may hold a lot of energy and potential to create, power plants off of, stuff like that. But element 115 hasn't really been considered because it's always predicted it would have a very short half-life. So in other words, when you create it, it disintegrates immediately. I mean, within seconds. And the Russians were able to develop some that lasted the longest, and that didn't even last a second. It's a matter of milliseconds how long that it lasts. So some people have argued that there are potentially different isotopes of element 115 that could be stable, because Bob Lazar said he even had a piece of element 115, and then this latest documentary about him gives the impression that the FBI went to his house to look for element 115. But the problem is that many people are saying that that's actually not true as far as there being a stable isotope, that there couldn't be a stable isotope. I don't know. I don't know enough about the science, and I should be talking to someone about that, and I will soon. Someone that I have talked about these matters with is Chris Cogswell, and he says that he hasn't talked about the details on that, but maybe I'll have Chris Cogswell back and I'll see what he says. So we'll see. I don't know, but the element 115 does not prove anything when it comes to Lazar. Nothing proves anything when it comes to Lazar. We found out that its degrees are likely not real, that he claims, so that seems to be something he's lying about. However, we did come to find he did work at Los Alamos. He currently owns a scientific company, United Nuclear, that develops, scientific supplies for high schools and for labs. So he's definitely very intelligent and knowledgeable. He's created these rocket cars and all these other things, rocket bike, and so he's obviously a highly intelligent person, capable of doing science. I think that it wouldn't be a stretch to call him a scientist. Some haven't. He's definitely doing science currently in his work. But that doesn't mean he worked at Area 51. We did find out he worked at Los Alamos, but we don't know what capacity he worked in. Some people have suggested he could be a janitor, and that's true. That's possible, but probably not likely. It could be he was a tech of some sort, which would make more sense because he's scientifically capable of doing something like that, it appears. I've also talked to others who have talked to him during this time he supposedly lived or worked at Area 51, and they said he did come across. He said he was an engineer and he knew what he was talking about. So I don't know. Tons of huge debate out there. There are these anti-Lazar forces aligning to definitely prove he's full of it. I think that group, if they feel that they have the smoking gun to prove that he's definitively lying, need to be a little more organized and a little more concise in their claims. And maybe they will be. I haven't seen it yet, but I know there's a lot of skeptics out there who are kind of gunning for him. And it's kind of funny. George Knapp is the guy who brought him out. He's also the guy who works closely with Robert Bigelow and with Luis Elizondo, or all of these guys doing this other research, many of whom don't believe Lazar at all, even though Knapp is pretty much his most credible proponent, I think. So it's a very, very different or interesting case. I do have a video out there where I compare his case to a known disinformation case that we are aware of, just pointing out the similarities to speculate, could that be it? Could this have been some sort of official sort of disinformation project? Somebody asked any more about the debate with Friedman. On our UFO Congress YouTube page, we have the debate between Jeremy and Friedman up. And so, yeah, if you haven't watched that, watch it. I'll put a little card here so it'll pop up there. But, yeah, that's true. It was in 2015. So check that out. That's in our the YouTube page for the International UFO Congress. Just playing with the background. Look at that. Cool. Anyway, that is it for today. Someone said, no, they mean Lazar and Friedman. No. For better or worse, and take this for what you will, in that 2015 debate, you hear me and Jeremy mentioning that, Stan says he's willing to debate Lazar, and we got to arrange that. Lazar has zero interest in talking to Friedman. Some people feel that shows that he is lying and being elusive, but from Jeremy Corbell, who made the film with Lazar and is friends with Lazar, and from Lazar, I guess he says that he has no need to. He doesn't need to prove himself to anyone. He doesn't care if anybody believes him, and so he doesn't want to waste his time, essentially, talking about this stuff that he doesn't want to talk about anymore. So we had him at the International UFO Congress in 2015. It was very difficult to get him there. I didn't even know if he was going to show up, minutes before he came on stage. And thank goodness he did. Well, it was more than a minute. It might be an hour or so, because he came, the talk before him was George Knapp. So he came to see Knapp. But before he showed up, which wasn't too long before Knapp's talk, I didn't know if he was going to show up at all. So thank goodness he did. Knapp didn't know either. So, but he did show up. So thank goodness. Anyway, you could check out actually his lecture. Also, I'll put it in a link below, but you can see that online and on demand. So there we go. So I am going to call it an evening. I hope you had fun. I hope you had a lovely evening. Let me bring up my end screen. Oh, look at this cute little screen I made. We'll look at that later. But here's my end screen. So here you'll see some videos that you can check out. And please do push the button below to subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching again. I hope you go to openminds.tv, check out the podcast that I've referred to. You can also find links to that information on my Patreon. Also, do check out the UFO Congress, and if you like my little UFO here, and even that, there's a lamp next somewhere. But you can find that at the store at UFO Congress. So if you go to ufocongress.com, click that store link, or just go to store.ufocongress.com. We have lots of really cool UFO and alien stuff, and we're getting more all the time. So thank you all so much for joining me, and we'll talk to you next week. Until then, adios, muchachos.